Thank you, Jim. And more about Jim in a moment. When something like this happens to you, and you have some time, as my fellow laureates have said this evening, to think about it, you think about it in a number of different ways. And experiences that you have between the moment that you receive the letter and the moment that you stand here, and sort of accumulate and give you perspective as to the meaning of it and the extraordinary nature of it, that this has actually happened. And things that you don't expect to give you pause as you're sort of thinking about it in everyday pursuits, accumulate and provide that perspective. Just earlier this week, my wife Jackie and I were driving and on our way to join Norm and Virginia Bobbins at the gala for WTTW. And as we were driving along in one of the northern neighborhoods, we drove up the drive, and memory serves, we turned on to Foster and headed on through the neighborhood, and Jackie said to me, right there, right down from this street, 1 block away, is the apartment where my grandfather and my grandmother lived, and where my father grew up along with my uncle. We often say, Jackie and I, because we've been so fortunate to have such an interesting life, that we wish that our parents were still alive to see this moment. And we actually are so fortunate that we have the occasion to say it often. On this occasion, as I was musing about the fact that I had never really visited the apartment building where her first-generation immigrants from England to Chicago had lived, and where her father, who, with only a high school education, became a full-bird colonel in the U.S. Air Force, grew up and went to high school. And I thought to myself, boy, it would be really great if Charlie and Hetty, real Chicagoans, people who immigrated to this city of their choice, could be here to see Jackie and Glenn this evening. Thinking about that, I often think about the man for whom we honor laureates this evening, and what he would think if he were here on the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Lincoln Academy and the Society of Laureates. First of all, I think he'd be very pleased with all that has been done over the years. But because he was a humble man, he might be a little surprised that we're all dressed as we are this evening. And I thought about that too in the course of this period where you muse about these things. And I, like most people, I suppose, in the audience, I read Secretary Gates' book, and I paused at the passage where he said, when he went for his morning jog, he would come to the Lincoln Memorial and he would look up at that extraordinary statue and he would ask himself, how did you do it? How did you do it to the statue of Abraham Lincoln? And yet I think The answer is actually quite clear. And I think he did it because he was put into a position where it was simply left to him to do it. And if he didn't do it, nobody else was going to do it. There wasn't anybody else coming to do it for President Lincoln. And as my fellow laureates have said this evening, there's nobody coming to tackle the challenges of Illinois and Chicago other than us. There's nobody else coming. And when you find yourself in a situation like this, as Secretary Gates did, maybe the question isn't, how did you do it? How did you do it? But how could you not? It was up to you. If you go back and read through all of the wonderful biographies of the man, there's not a lot to suggest that he was going to be the person that was going to shoulder that extraordinary burden that must have seemed impossible at that time. But somehow or other, his life had prepared him for just that occasion. Again, if we reflect on all of the qualities that form a prism, which I think is what makes him very, very special. Character, check the box. Courage, check the box. Humility, check. Humor, self-deprecating humor. He was not an arrogant man. Check the box. And perhaps most of all, for which I think I personally celebrate as being, humanity. Intense, genuine humanity. And if you think of all of those characteristics, then all of us up here this evening should be very humbled simply by being associated with his name. Thank you very much, Governor. Thanks to all of you. I appreciate it.